Are the Bulldogs ready to take out Bama? Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, talking Georgia football here. Please lock it in for the best discussion, debate, and analysis on college football each and every day. We got Greg Poole on the line from Bulldog Illustrated. Greg is also a voter for the Biletnikoff Award, which of course goes to the nation's top wide receiver. Greg, how you doing today?
I'm great, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Of course, Georgia's had two outstanding seasons under Kirby Smart after an 8-5 initial campaign. And despite not being a major college football coach prior to the assignment at Georgia, boy, he has really elevated the program. Maybe the only criticism that some would have would be late game finishes in key games against one team. And that, of course, Alabama with a double-digit leads twice in SEC and national championship games. So Kirby Smart doing an outstanding job. The recruiting has been off the charts. The play on the field has been exemplary, excluding a couple of missteps this past season against LSU and Texas. Your thoughts about the job that he's turned in thus far?
I don't see how he could have done much better unless he had won those games that you mentioned, but that would have really been phenomenal, wouldn't it?
Basically, we've got a situation in which they're coming through another spring practice. They've got a veteran quarterback in play in Jake Fromm. They've lost the customary load of NFL talent like any of the other top 5 to 10 programs in the nation. Just your thoughts about what you saw at the spring game, but more so the entirety of the 15 sessions during the spring, and what stays with you in regards to what do you think was accomplished?
Yeah, Georgia's Kirby's spring games are not showcase games. He typically doesn't do the kinds of things that some coaches do to really give the fans a show. It's a practice to him. Although he obviously does some things. We had the trick play to Mathis in the G-Day game where he caught a touchdown pass, Mathis being the freshman quarterback that signed with Georgia after a certain quarterback left and went to Ohio State. So basically we traded. But the spring practice as a whole, I think, reflected Kirby's general philosophy about football. That is that Georgia is always going to be a program that runs the ball. And what, to me, the highlight of spring practice was offensive line development. They may have the best offensive line talent as a room that I've ever seen. It typically, most teams, have a couple of 5 stars. I'm really doing this off the top of my head, so it may not be exactly accurate. But the 5 guys that started for the red team in G-Day on the offensive line averaged 6'4", 332, I believe, and there was not a senior in the group. Of course, there are a couple of guys that are probably going to leave early after this year, Andrew Thomas being one at left tackle, and the right tackle, who is a redshirt sophomore, whose name is escaping me at the moment. Wilson, number 79, may well be gone to the NFL also. But to me, that's the story of the spring, is the offensive line. The second unit is that started for the black team at G-Day is essentially the same size. And by the way, that first team offensive line, if you follow star ratings from the 247 star ratings, they averaged a 4. It's pretty high for an offensive line.
Absolutely. And I'm certainly amazed at the task that the offensive line unit individually and again as a group has to take on, especially in that conference against the quality of defensive linemen and the speed that comes off the edge and trying to protect the quarterback in particular and also mount a running game. And you've got to have it. You can't have the likes of what we've seen at Kentucky recently recently with Josh Allen, the players at Florida, and obviously in the Western Division as well. That speed and just that talent and athleticism on defense just wreck your game plan. So the offensive line has to be first rate.
It's even more critical with what Kirby wants to do. He wants to line up and wear out your defense, and that's what he's been doing ever since the first year. And he ran the offense that way in the first year. He just didn't have the horses to do it. But since then, he's done the same thing. Now, the coordinator has changed. The offensive coordinator has changed this year with James Coley, most recently before Georgia at Miami, I believe, taking over the coordinator duties. He was a tight end coach until last year when he moved to quarterbacks. And this year he'll be essentially running the offense. Frankly, last year I think they had something like 46% passing plays. And this year they might bump that all the way up to 51 or 52. I mean, I don't see a huge change in the offense. Kirby's calling the shots from a philosophical point of view, and that's not changing.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love, hardcore debate, discussion, and analysis each and every day. We bring in the best bloggers and broadcasters that we can find. Greg Poole's on the line from Bulldog Illustrated. We're talking Georgia football. The recruiting has been just... it was extremely good under Mark Richt. I've gone through the recruiting rankings under Richt year to year. He was certainly in that top 5 to 15 range consistently, but it's been even amped up since Kirby Smart took over. Do you have a reason as to what has been the difference between Richt and Kirby Smart on the recruiting path?
I'm not sure that I know what that is. Richt was obviously a good recruiter. There are some philosophical differences. Going back to what I was just talking about with offensive line recruiting is at a different level. And I have an old interview from Mark Richt from, I can't remember what year, maybe 2012 or something like that, where someone asked him about offensive line recruiting. And he said something, if he hears this, he's probably going to kill me for misquoting him, but he said something to the effect that going back to his days with Bobby Bowden, that what they didn't necessarily have to have the biggest and best offensive linemen. They just needed some guys to get in the way of the defense so that their superior skill players could get loose. And I think that was true when he was coaching with Bobby Bowden, but I think that Nick Saban has proven that the game has changed, or maybe he changed the game since then. And Kirby Smart is recruiting as he did with Alabama, and very similarly to the way that Nick Saban has recruited. That is, for its offense, he bases it on his line, and of course then tries to recruit the best skill players based on the fact that they're going to have an outstanding offensive line. On defense, I think what you're seeing at Georgia is that he is recruiting solid defensive linemen whose job in the base 3-4 is to hold up as much of the opponent's offensive line as possible to let uber skilled linebackers make the plays. When he had the kid that just went to Chicago, Roquan Smith, that philosophy worked really well, and he's got a couple of freshman linebackers coming in this year that should be able to come in and play and make it work again.
We get Greg Poole on the line. You can join him at Bulldog Illustrated, and also a Biletnikoff Award voter for the best wide receiver in the nation. Greg, let's look at the NFL draft, and obviously when you recruit them, especially in the SEC, about 3 to 4 years later, that's the same reflection on the other side. So the SEC recruits the best players, and that's proven out in mass by the star rankings. And a lot of people balk at the recruiting rankings, but they certainly, again, in mass, not individually, mean a whole lot. And then 3 to 4 years later, we see the most players out of any conference coming out of the SEC, and in particular, of course, the top programs. Mecole Hardman, DeAndre Baker, DeAndre Walker, 3 of the players that were plucked up that appear to be good fits and could have big rookie seasons. Your thoughts about the latest haul of Bulldogs to the next level?
Baker, of course, is an excellent defensive back. As far as I know, he was never beaten for a touchdown as a starter at Georgia. I mean, that's what else can you say? McCole Hardman, I've seen him since he was in high school. He grew up not too far from Athens. I saw him play in high school a couple of times, and he played quarterback in high school, and was converted to a wide receiver. Has excellent speed, and if he can stay healthy, I think will be a long-term NFL player. The kid is not big at all, and but he's got the speed, he's got the moves, he's a returner. And I read someone's projection, I can't remember who, that he may that may be his initial role in the NFL as a return man. DeAndre Walker was injured at the end of last year, and that may have hurt his draft status. As I remember, he did not go to the combine or did not perform at the combine. He had surgery in December last year, and is just getting healthy now. But I think Georgia had 7, I believe, 6 or 7 players drafted. The only player that Georgia fans thought would be drafted who didn't get drafted was Elijah Holyfield. Obviously the son of the former heavyweight champion, and a star running back for Georgia. Had a terrible combine. Ran I can't remember what he ran right now, but not fast at all. And so he went undrafted.
Yeah, we have 7 players from Georgia here in the 2019 NFL Draft, the 3 that we mentioned, and also Terry Godwin went to the Panthers, Isaac Nada to the Lions, Lamont Gaillard to the Arizona Cardinals, Riley Ridley, of course, a big postseason play out of him in recent years to the Bears to join Roquan Smith. We got Greg Poole on the line from Bulldog Illustrated talking Georgia football. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We asked that you survey the videos, over 7,000 discussion, debate, and analysis on college football, and you dig in and help build the channel by subscribing. Also, you can grab the Amazon link in the description section below. It doesn't cost you a penny. Just do your Amazon shopping using that link. All right. In regards to Georgia's dominance in the division, it's been just that over the last 2 years. Based on what Dan Mullen's doing, specifically in Gainesville, I think the Kentucky presence and contention may have been short-lived. They had such a strong senior class and obviously were no match for Georgia on the field head-to-head. But what Dan Mullen's doing in Gainesville, is that catching the eye of the Georgia faithful?
Yeah, I think it's catching the eye. He's got a way to go before I think they can go to toe and slug it out 4 quarters with Georgia. Going back to that offensive line, Florida's got some recruiting depth, some quality depth issues that they're going to have to correct before this is a Georgia-Florida game for the SEC East. It may be anyway, but Florida's got that cross-conference rivalry with LSU. That LSU is maybe the up-and-coming Western team as compared to Georgia's cross-conference rival Auburn. Of course, Auburn's always good, but LSU seems to be making greater strides. I don't know. I don't follow them day to day, obviously. So, but that just is a quick opinion. I think Georgia, Florida this year is I don't know about the score, but I think it's going to be much like last year. I think Georgia just has more players, and typically that leads to a fourth quarter difference of 14 points or so.
And that's exactly what happened. Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was like a 17-16 game, late third quarter, early fourth quarter. Georgia dominated the last 10 to 12 minutes of the game and rode out to a 19-point victory. 36-17 comes to mind in that one. All right, Greg Poole's on the line from Bulldog Illustrated, talking Georgia football and talking of the Bulldogs for 2019. One last question for you would be just that. We talk about the Florida matchup. We talk about Georgia's outstanding seasons and recruiting classes the last 2 years, but coming up short in the national championship game, the SEC championship game. What are the expectations, the reasonable expectations for a Georgia fan this year?
Well, you put that qualifier in. The fan expectations are to win the national championship. I can tell you from my boards on my site what fans want. They are still. Let's go back just a little bit. When you opened the show, you talked about the 2 losses to Bama, and I think that goes right back to what we were talking about with recruiting and quality depth. I see those 2 losses as just that. In both those cases, you have Nick Saban's, take the last 5 years. So, potentially you got some players on a squad who are 5th-year seniors. Okay, so if you take the last 5 years, you're going back into Mark Richt's recruits for Kirby Smart. But in Saban's case, he's got 5 years of Saban recruiting. This will be, 4 years of Kirby Smart recruiting. Well, what happened in those last 2 games with Alabama is exactly what we were talking about happened in the Georgia-Florida game last year. Alabama's quality depth told in the end. It's as simple as that. And that's not to say that if Georgia meets them in a SEC championship or playoff situation this year, that they can't beat them. But quality depth is going to win usually. I think if Georgia and Alabama had played, I don't know, last year, if they played 10 times, Alabama probably would have won 8. And I don't know. I'd have to see the teams obviously before making that decision this year, but they're still going to have the edge in quality depth.
For somebody who covers Georgia football, I think that's a rather interesting take on the what would be a mythical series of playing 10 games against each other. That Georgia would only come away with 2 wins after we saw them basically play better football for about 50 minutes against Alabama last year. Do you think any of that possibly plays into Kirby Smart being a first-time head coach and that he's learning on the job and figuring things out, and maybe these decisions will be a little bit more sound in the future in critical situations?
I'm not sure the decisions were unsound. Again, no. To answer your question, my thought is that Alabama had more good players, and they were able to roll those players in the fourth quarter. I think Kirby Smart's decisions were based on what he saw with his exhausted team. I think that's why he went for that controversial play, because he knew that if he didn't get them then, he wasn't going to get them.
All right. We encourage you to check out Greg Poole at Bulldog Illustrated with the rest of the staff there for Georgia football coverage. You can hear the obvious insight and knowledge. Greg, we appreciate you stopping by. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you for having me.